Not every race car gets the respect and perhaps success that they deserve, be it due to bad timing, bad management, or just plain bad luck. So let's take a look at some of racing's greatest missed opportunities. First up is the Toyota GT1, a channel favourite. I love this car, and I'm sure many of you do too, but this isn't just a list about cars I personally like, so why did the TS020 deserve better? Well, because it got unlucky on a couple of fronts. Most famously, of course, was Le Mans 1999. Toyota hadn't been super impressive in 1998, but with the option to reuse their car in 1999's new LMGTP class, the GT1 had been given its golden opportunity. It was a race defined by misfortune, and while Toyota didn't suffer the worst of it, they did miss a shot at victory. BMW were leading their race in their LMP spec V12 LMR, and Toyota's leading GT1 was catching up towards the end of the race, on pace to overtake the BMW before the end of the grueling 24 hours. Unfortunately, fate had other ideas, as the Toyota suffered a puncture and had to dive into the pits for a costly, unscheduled stop, costing them the race. This is one of those things that happens in racing, but unfortunately the GT1 wouldn't have the opportunity to try again, as Toyota canned their prototype racing program after the 1999 season, after just 2 years of competition for the GT1, in which it had only competed in 3 races: Le Mans 1998 and 99, and the Le Mans Fuji 1000, in which they came a tantalising second yet again. Sticking with Le Mans, I have to talk about Aston Martin's ill-fated 1989 Group C entry, the AMR1. This should have been a triumphant return to top-flight endurance racing for one of Britain's most recognisable sporting marques. Instead, it was a monumental failure. Aston had been trying to get into Group C since the start, contributing engines in a series of doomed partnerships that never yielded strong results. Eventually, the decision was taken for the company to take matters into its own hands, and so the Aston boss, Victor Gauntlet, established a company to develop a proper Aston Martin Group C prototype that would put them back on the motorsport map. Unfortunately, despite the huge investment made to develop the car, it was hamstrung by the decision to base the engine on the underpowered V8 from the company's newest road car offering. The 5.3-litre Virage engine was handed over to Reeves Callaway for development into a race-ready unit, but with a starting output of just 330 horsepower, pulling it in line with 800-plus horsepower outputs of rivals such as Sauber, Mercedes and Jaguar would turn out to be a tall order, even for a wizard like Callaway. In the end, it proved too tough of a task, with output never significantly exceeding 700 horsepower and causing the AMR1 to occupy the field's tail end for the whole 1989 World Sports Car Championship season. It would never compete again, and the proposed evolutions for 1990 and beyond were scrapped to save cash. Built by the ambitious Jim Hall for the 1970 Can-Am season, the 2J is heralded as the birth of the fan car. Making use of 2 large fans powered by a snowmobile engine, the 2J created a vacuum underneath itself to suck the car to the road. Much like normal aerodynamic downforce, this allowed for higher cornering speeds thanks to better grip, but unlike traditional aerodynamic downforce, Hall's active system created a consistent level of downforce regardless of the car's speed, allowing the 2J to take lower speed corners much faster than rivals that relied on airflow to generate their downforce. Hall's design also cleverly limited leakage with the use of plastic skirts around the floor edge to reduce the rate at which air would rush under the car to fill the low pressure zone, enhancing the effect further. The rails holding these skirts were also unsprung, keeping the skirts a consistent distance from the track even while cornering or braking, reducing the risk of a sudden loss of vacuum and therefore downforce. This wasn't without issues though. The 2J was undone on numerous occasions by overheating, thanks in no small part to the fact that the engine bay contained 2 engines, one to power the wheels and another to power the fans. If either one of them was to fail, the car was completely useless. The second major problem was external to Chaparral. It was their rivals. Everyone hated it. McLaren spearheaded a campaign to get the 2J banned by the SCCA, Can-Am's governing body, on the grounds that it was unsafe to follow, as the fans would suck up and then eject debris and fluid out the back of the car into anyone unlucky enough to be following. The actual severity of this issue was hotly contested, but the upshot was that after the 1970 season, Hall's innovative active downforce was banned. As they hadn't had time to develop the car enough to solve its reliability problems, the Chaparral 2J saw limited success in its short career before being quickly relegated to the history books. Brabham's BT46B, designed by the legendary Gordon Murray, was very much inspired by the 2J. Murray saw the potential of active downforce to change the game in Formula 1, and so he cooked up the infamous BT46B. It was less aggressive than the 2J and used an extra output shaft from the car's single engine to power the fan, unlike Chaparral's dual engine design. This tied the fan speed to the engine speed and made for an unintuitive optimal driving style where the driver would have to accelerate through a corner to spin up the fan and stick the car to the road. Much like the 2J, this was an effective way of cornering faster when done right. Like the 2J, the BT46B used floor edge skirts to maintain the low pressure zone under the car, and to try and avoid the ire of rivals, a set of filters were installed to reduce the risk of the fan ejecting shrapnel at following cars. F1's rules didn't allow for movable aerodynamic devices, so Brabham passed this system off as a cooling device, directing the airflow over a radiator to legitimately aid cooling. The downforce was simply a secondary effect, not the primary application, apparently. Regardless of the particulars, the car was allowed to compete, debuting at the 1978 Swedish Grand Prix and taking victory immediately. This was a bridge too far for Brabham's competitors, much like the 2J had been in Can-Am. Except instead of a mediocre season, the BT46B had a single good race before being forced out. Brabham team boss Bernie Eccleston didn't want the political headache of continuing to run the controversial car, and soon enough the rules loophole was closed anyway, ending Formula 1's fan car era before it had even begun, and enshrining the BT46B as the first, last and only fan car to have competed in the sport, ensuring it would forever have a 100% win rate. So why did it deserve better? Well, I think if Formula 1 wants to seriously call itself the pinnacle of motorsport, it should be more accommodating of innovative ideas and creative solutions cooked up within the confines of the rules. Remember, the BT46B had been declared legal by the FIA before it competing, and the race that it won still stands. Brabham's car was legal when it raced. To a certain extent, they deserved to enjoy the fruits of their out-the-box approach for longer than a single Grand Prix weekend. We're staying with F1 for this next one, but this car wasn't a victim of F1 itself, and more so a great idea stifled by impracticality. The Tyrrell P34 is a famous six-wheeled Formula 1 car that competed for 2 years in 1976 and 1977. The basic idea was that the car's aerodynamics would be better if the front wheels could be obscured entirely behind the front wing of the car. This meant making the wheels smaller in diameter, but in order to maintain the same level of grip, they would need to find a way of keeping a similar contact area with the track. The easiest way to do this would have been to make the wheels wider, but there was a limit on front wing width to just 1.5 meters. And the wheels couldn't be moved further inboard due to the space required for the steering system and the driver's legs, so a creative solution was required. They arrived at the conclusion that the best way to tick all their boxes was to have two sets of extraordinarily small 10-inch wheels at the front of the car. This meant a small front cross-section and maintained a large enough contact patch with the road, and had the added benefit of an extra set of brakes. The steering dilemma was solved elegantly with a bell crank, allowing both sets of wheels to turn together without massively overcomplicating the system and adding unnecessary weight, and with no rules in their way, Tyrrell were ready to go racing with one of the sport's most bizarre looking machines ever. Driving the two Elf Team Tyrrell cars in 1976 were Jody Scheckter and Patrick Depailler, both of whom found success in the car, finishing first and second in the Swedish Grand Prix and achieving a combined 10 podiums throughout the 1976 season, finishing the championship with 71 points and finishing third overall in the Constructors' Championship. Despite this very impressive performance, especially from such an unorthodox design concept in its first year of competition, Scheckter left the team at the end of 1976, describing the P34 as a quote, piece of junk. Despite the tension, Tyrrell were buoyed by the success in 1976 and pushed forward with the P34 in 1977, retaining Depailler and replacing the disenfranchised Scheckter with Ronnie Peterson. The car had been moderately reworked for the sake of aerodynamic benefit, culminating in the 1977 P34B. This car was wider and heavier than the previous year's car, leaving it 86 kilograms over the F1 minimum of 575 kilograms at the time. A huge burden to overcome. The additional weight put adverse stress on the brakes and tyres. Tyres which Goodyear had neglected to develop further due to their extremely limited demand, and ultimately led the 1977 car to performing considerably worse than the team had done the previous year. In fact, to try and counter some of these negative effects, the team actually widened the track of the front wheels in an attempt to improve stability. This in turn meant that the wheel track was now wider than the front wing, defeating the entire point of the six-wheel design layout in the first place. The six-wheel concept was abandoned after 1977. The car should have been much more successful, but a combination of hesitation from Goodyear on the potential returns they would see from investing in the development of such a niche tyre, and Tyrrell's miscalculated evolution meant that the famous six-wheeled F1 car fizzled out. Porsche is no stranger to motorsport, holding the record for most manufacturer Le Mans wins, dominating sports car racing in multiple eras, and even running their own one-make series. It's safe to say the brand likes to race. However, lesser known is the company's flirtation with rally, and that one of the company's most iconic cars was originally concocted to compete in rally's most competitive class. Peter Schultz, Porsche's managing director in the mid-80s, was keen to begin development of a new 911. Helmut Bott, Porsche's chief engineer, convinced Schultz that building a Group B rally car would serve as an excellent way of developing and testing new technologies for the next generation of performance road cars. Bott believed this in part due to his conviction that the future of Porsche's high-performance road cars was in all-wheel drive vehicles. With a motorsport focus, it was decided that this new car would need to be more than just a 911 with four-wheel drive. It would need to be a total reimagining of the Porsche formula. Well, almost. The engine would stay at the back of the car. This was supposed to serve as a testbed for future 911s after all, but beyond that, not much would stay the same. The engine in question was a 2.8-litre twin-turbocharged flat-six, based largely on Porsche's Group C machines. The body would be all new, and made of lightweight materials such as aluminium and Kevlar composite. Group B was a road homologated class, meaning that a minimum number of road-legal vehicles must be built to satisfy the regulations before a vehicle is allowed to compete. Development of the 959 was slower than expected. So in order to speed up the process, a small number of 911 Carreras were retrofitted with the in-development all-wheel drive system from the 959, with a view to racing them in the Paris-Dakar Rally. They won, instilling confidence in the team at Porsche that the 959 and its new PSK all-wheel drive system would have a strong chance in Group B Rally. 1985 would finally see the debut of the Porsche 959, with the road car being revealed at the Frankfurt Motor Show as a planned 1986 model year car. Production delays meant that the road cars weren't ready for 1986, pushing back customer deliveries as well as their planned entrance into Group B Rally yet another year. They did compete in the Paris-Dakar Rally, as they didn't require homologation cars in their class, and they won, demonstrating the 959 was a winner. But sadly, 1986 would be the final year of Group B's running in the WRC, meaning that Porsche's now 1987 entry would be no more. The car did make it to Le Mans as the 961, but Porsche's 959 rally dream was dead. Just think how cool that would have been. Unlike the 959, the Group B MG Metro 6R4 did make it to WRC before the class was dissolved, but that doesn't make their timing all that much better. British Leyland saw the massive potential of a high-performance racing car program and invested a lot of resources in building a Group B rally car capable of beating the very best in the world. When the 6R4 was first devised, their plans to create a mid-engined car that also had four-wheel drive was pretty revolutionary, taking the best bits of Audi's 1981 Quattro and fixing its weight distribution issue to create a rally monster. That would have been great if they'd gotten their car ready for, say, 1983, but they didn't. Development dragged on for far longer than had been anticipated. This wasn't necessarily the worst thing in the world. The team were looking to perfect the car and ensure that when they did start competing, it would be competitive right off the bat, but unfortunately, they waited too long. The car had its WRC debut at the final round of the 1985 season, and by then, the forward-thinking concept was standard issue. Peugeot controlled 1985 with their own mid-engined four-wheel drive hatchback-shaped car, and at the same event as MG at the end of 1985, Lancia debuted their own take on the formula, the mighty Delta S4. Any potential conceptual advantage the 6R4 may have had long since evaporated, leaving them to find out which of the three had executed the concept best. This matchup did not shake out in MG's favour. The 6R4 suffered woeful and constant reliability problems during the 1986 season, and a few accidents on top, ending the year with a retirement rate of over 50%. Even excluding accidents, the purely mechanical retirement rate was a staggering 42%. The problem could have probably been fixed given some time, but 1986 had been a year of chaos and tragedy in the WRC, and so the decision had already been taken midway through the season that it would be Group B's final year of headlining the championship due to serious safety concerns. While the 6R4 would go on to compete in rally and rallycross events all over Europe for many years after Group B's demise, it never achieved the high-profile and international success and acclaim it was built for. The 6R4 is a story of what-ifs. Most commonly, people speculate that the car would have been successful if Group B had continued, but I doubt it would have beaten Peugeot and Lancia over an extra couple of years. Instead, I wonder, what if it had entered the fray in 1983 or 84? I think their best shot had long since passed them by the time the car was finally finished, and I think that's a real shame. Having demonstrated the power of Quattro all-wheel drive on the rally stages of Europe, the dissolution of Group B forced star manufacturer Audi to try their hand at something new. Yes, they continued rallying in Group A, but Lancia had that on lock with the Delta, and Audi were looking for a new arena to flex their sporting muscle anyway. They chose North America, which kept the board of directors happy as building a strong reputation in one of the largest consumer markets on the planet, the United States, surely made the racing budget easier to sign off on. Their first endeavour was effectively a no-holds-barred racing version of the Audi 200 they had gone rallying with in 1987. Entered into the 1988 Trans Am season, the 200 Quattro made a bit of a stink. It was powered by Audi's now trusty 2.1-litre turbocharged inline 5, and as the name might suggest, it also boasted the company's famous Quattro all-wheel drive system, something their American counterparts weren't happy about. So unhappy with the Americans, in fact, that a handful of manufacturers protested Audi's car, insisting it had some sort of unfair advantage. While there was nothing stopping them from theoretically developing a car to rival the Audi, what happened instead was a series of ever more punitive enforcement measures were brought against the 200 throughout the 1988 season, starting with ballast weight and progressing to restrictor plates and narrower tyres, all in an effort to peg Audi back. It didn't work, and despite the SCCA trying desperately to stop it, Audi won the Trans Am Constructors' Championship in 1988. Gracious as ever, the SCCA congratulated them by banning all-wheel drive from 1989, as well as any engine manufactured outside the United States, not so subtly forcing Audi out and allowing the American manufacturers to relax again, at least in Trans Am. The ban didn't surprise Audi after a year of very pointed restrictions, and so development had been underway on a new track weapon for 1989 aimed squarely at IMSA. IMSA's homologation requirements were even more relaxed than Trans Am, allowing Audi to design effectively a brand new car just to attack the series. Crucially, still allowing quattro and foreign engines, while additionally allowing the car to be built around a space frame and take advantage of composite bodywork to save weight. The car was rapid, but unfortunately it proved a bit unreliable, and despite a strong second place in both the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship in the 1989 IMSA GTO class, the Audi 90 IMSA GTO would not get the chance to find victory, as after 1989, Audi withdrew from all US-based competition. Both the 200 Quattro Trans Am and the 90 IMSA GTO could and should have achieved more for different reasons. America just wasn't quite ready for them. For anyone who already knows the story of the TWR Porsche WSC-95, this might seem like an odd car to include on this list. It famously won Le Mans outright, twice in a row, in 1996 and 1997, so why are we talking about it here? Well, it should have done even more. The WSC-95 was a joint project between Tom Walkinshaw Racing and Porsche. Created to compete in the WSC-P class in IMSA, the car was a mismatch of Group C bits with a new LMP-style body over the top. Under the skin, it had the chassis from a Jaguar XJ13 and the 3-litre flat 6 from a Porsche 956. Unfortunately, the rule set the car had been built for was scrapped, and Porsche weren't interested in finding something to do with it, so the project was just cancelled. And it looked like the WSC-95 would disappear into the annals of time. Fortunately for the car, Reinhold Jost knew it existed, and asked Porsche if he could buy it and campaign it at Le Mans under his team, Jost Racing. Porsche accepted, given they had no other plans with the car anyway, so what did they care? Jost modified the single existing car for racing at Le Mans, and also set about building a brand new second car from the ground up to the same specification. They were confident it was a winner, and they were right. The number 7 Jost Racing TWR Porsche WSC-95 won Le Mans in 1996. That name's a mouthful, innit? Embarrassingly for Porsche, the car they'd abandoned and sold beat their factory GT1 effort. After a surprise win in 1996, Jost was keen to get back out in 1997, where history repeated itself, as the WSC-95 won the event yet again, and again beat Porsche's factory team, who were running a freshly upgraded evolution of the 911 GT1. Porsche was, once again, probably not over the moon at this result. For 1998, Porsche reinserted themselves into the project, commandeering control and modifying the cars further. This time, the WSC-95 didn't win. Porsche's 911 GT1 98 did instead. Funny that. The WSC-95 was as astonishingly fast as it was surprising, and if its potential had been realised from the start, it certainly would have achieved far more than it did. And that's saying something, because 2 Le Mans victories are nothing to sniff at. The Jaguar XJ13 was a prototype racing car born out of the company's V12 concept engines of the late 1950s. Their Le Mans success through the mid to late 50s saw Jaguar engineers devising an unbeatable platform to keep Jag at the front of the field heading into the 1960s. This led to the development of a cutting-edge 5-litre V12 which produced almost 500 horsepower and could propel a slippery enough car to almost 200 miles per hour. Hugely impressive numbers for the time. Malcolm Sayer was hired to design that slippery body, a renowned aerodynamicist and designer of the Jaguar C and D-type models. The shape was sensational, but the true innovation in his exterior design lay in the materials used. Aluminium. The entire body was constructed from this stuff and riveted together. This simplicity and the material choice kept the car light, allowing the monstrous engine to flex its muscle without the burden of a heavy chassis. So what went wrong? Well, the XJ13 joined an unfortunate fraternity of vehicles rendered useless by a change in the rules. For the XJ13, which had taken a long time to develop to fruition, this was a rule change for the 1967 24 Hours of Le Mans that saw the maximum engine displacement allowed for prototype vehicles capped at 3 litres. Their newly developed 5-litre V12 fell quite spectacularly short, or rather large, of this requirement, meaning that rumours of 3 XJ13s racing at Le Mans failed to materialise, and in fact only one car was ever made. This, however, was not the end of the road for the XJ13. Jaguar had poured a lot of time and a lot of money into developing the engine for this car, and they were certainly not going to allow it to go to waste entirely. They continued testing the car, with a view to transplanting the engine into the next version of the E-Type. They took the priceless vehicle to the Myra Test Centre in 1971, and while filming a promotional video for the upcoming E-Type, the XJ13 was crashed at high speed. Luckily, the test driver was unharmed, but the car was completely wrecked. Jaguar quickly put the remains into storage. At some point between the crash in 1971 and its quote-unquote debut in July of 1973, the car was rebuilt similarly to the original spec by Abbey Motors. Despite Jaguar being keen to comment that the car is not an exact replica of the original Le Mans spec car, it was constructed using many of the same jigs and undoubtedly shared many parts with the original, making it as close as we can ever get to the racing classic. It's impossible to know whether it would have won if raced in anger, but I'm pretty sure it would have been the best looking car on track regardless. What car are you furious I didn't include? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, maybe I'll make a follow-up sometime. This video was available early to channel members. Click the join button below to support the channel and get early access to future videos. Thank you so much to existing channel members, your support helps immensely. Thanks for watching, and until next time, goodbye.